Zohran Kwame Mamdani on CNN's Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
Is staying in the race. He announced that he is not going to take some other position he was reportedly being offered by Trump. Why do you think he's staying?
You know, I cannot speak to Eric Adams' motivations or his interests. I can just tell you that it's been a lot of noise these last few weeks. And we've seen that this is the specialty of Donald Trump and his puppets. A lot of noise, few results. And all of it distracts from the fact that 1 in 4 New Yorkers are living in poverty in this city. And so often their concerns, their welfare has been secondary to the interests of these so-called leaders in trying to figure out their own futures.
Do you think Trump's involvement in this race at this point is helping you?
I think it's showcasing what's at stake, which is the fact that we have a vision to actually help New Yorkers afford their city. And Donald Trump has a vision to try and rip apart the very fabric of the city. He has passed legislation that will throw millions of New Yorkers off of their health care.
Good messaging. Rip apart the fabric that binds us, the social fabric. Good message.
Paying on cheaper groceries is now cutting SNAP for hungry New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs.
What about when Donald Trump has threatened to bring troops into New York? He's done it in Washington. He wants to do it in Baltimore, Chicago. If you're elected mayor, I mean, do you think that that's the first thing he's going to do? Because he's made it clear he's invested in what happens here. He's a longtime New York resident. He does not want to see you elected. If you are, do you expect that he'll get involved?
We will prepare for every eventuality. And I agree with what Commissioner Tisch of the NYPD said, which is that we do not need the National Guard here. The NYPD can create that public safety for New Yorkers. And we've seen an example of how to fight back against this federal overreach in California, where you had the governor, the mayor, the attorney general work together to file a lawsuit that a judge recently found that the federal government was illegally deploying the National Guard there. That's the kind of partnership we need to see in New York. And yet that's exactly the opposite of what we saw when Andrew Cuomo was leading the state.
So lawsuits would be your first step?
I think lawsuits. I also think the fact that we look at our own law department, which has been on the forefront of some of the most critical cases in the country, and yet it's staffed at pre-pandemic levels, not even at the level that it used to be before COVID. That needs to be brought up with 200 additional lawyers.
So in Baltimore, in the state of Maryland, just today, the mayor there and the governor, they're surging resources into the city to address crime, to address public safety. They're saying it's not anything to do with Donald Trump. What are you going to do about public safety in New York? I mean, is there a responsibility that you would have to actually make the city safer for New Yorkers, to address those concerns that are very real?
Absolutely. That is one of my primary responsibilities. And it's interesting that you actually mentioned Baltimore, because you can see in Baltimore that they've managed to bring down the number of homicides and shootings through an understanding of the very different tools you have to implement to actually confront the scourge of gun violence. Here in New York City, I would work alongside the NYPD to create that public safety and also invest in existing infrastructure we have here that is not at the full scale it could be. Infrastructure that has been shown to reduce shootings by up to 40%, and it goes by the name of the crisis management system.
You know, you've said you wanted to debate Donald Trump. A lot of people ask the question, are you and Donald Trump more similar than maybe you might want to let on? And specifically on this issue of socialism, even Trump's own allies, his fellow Republicans like Rand Paul, have suggested that some of his policies are socialist in nature. He took a stake in Intel in exchange for U.S. government funds.
Donald Trump is not a socialist. That is crazy. Oh my God. This country is so busted, dude. I don't know what to say. It's just maybe a national socialist, and those guys weren't socialist at all. Revoking citizenship to millions of people, and also presenting himself as a left populist on economic policy for the chosen Americans, legacy Americans. Tucker Carlson calls them white Americans. That seems quite a bit like the national socialism. And also deeply antagonistic towards the socialists and the communists and the trade unionists and everyone else. That is a key part of the national socialist identity. And Donald Trump has that as well. So I guess he's more of a national socialist than a socialist at all, considering that the historic national socialist movement was not exactly socialist and was deeply antagonistic to socialism, very violently, openly.
People have called that socialist. Do you think that that's a good idea?
I think that Donald Trump and I have one thing in common, which is that we talk about the need for cheaper groceries. The difference between the two of us is that I'm actually going to deliver on that. And that's what I think is so frustrating, is that he spoke to the needs that New Yorkers had, that Americans had. They truly believed that his promise of a cheaper and a more affordable life was possible, but he's shown no interest in that. You look at his economic policies, they have exacerbated that crisis.
But first of all, do you think that there are some things that Trump has done that are more socialist than capitalist?
I don't think there is much that Donald Trump does that can be understood through the idea of ideology. I think he does whatever it is he decides to do each and every day with his own.
The only thing I would say in this process, like, is something that Bernie has said as well, which is that, like, any kind of initiative that any kind of initiative that people take that potentially harms the profit margins, that works to give a better upper hand to the working class, can be seen as not socialist, but a degree of socialization or anti-capitalist in general. Having said that, it's all a matter of what Trump does with the 10% that he purchases from Intel for the government. That's what matters here. There is no indication that he will actually do anything. There's no indication that he's actually going to do anything that's pro-labor in this regard. Just as Bernie Sanders said, demanding a stake in Intel for all of the unlimited grants and the unlimited money that the government is offering Intel is perfectly understandable. But it's what you do with that stake that matters. Just like with tariffs, as socialists and as anti-capitalists, we are not against the concept of trade protectionism. We understand the complex global web of production that has been designed. Having said that, however, it is important to make sure that domestic manufacturing does not suffer in the process. Many mistakes have been made in the direction of global finance that has harmed the American heartland. Look no further than these ghost cities that now exist everywhere. Cities that used to play a formative role in American manufacturing now have been reduced to rubble. We must reverse these mistakes. Having said that, however, this requires bold, radical change to build a robust industrial base here in the United States of America. And in the absence of that, simply engaging in this false trade protectionist attitude has clearly been an abject failure. It's ruining the economy. If you have no real trade to protect, if you have no real manufacturing to protect, and not just manufacturing that means you will have low-paying jobs in every city, in every state, but manufacturing that will bring back jobs that are unionized, that have great wages, great benefits, the real kind of jobs that made America the giant of manufacturing post-World War II in this boom that we experienced and benefited quite greatly from. A real redistributive policy. These are the things that America needs. These are the things that America needs, but Donald Trump will never deliver on. Less regulations is not a good thing. Wait, what? I never said that, but okay.
Mind as the centerpiece of.
On the rent stabilization, on the impact of your proposals on housing in this city, there's a lot of concern that it'll cause people to leave, that it'll cause, dilapidated housing, that it'll cause landlords to go out of business. But my question to you is,
oh my God, everything is framed so negatively. It's crazy. Everything is so negatively framed. God damn. Yeah, what about the mom and pop landlords, she says? Like, look, dude, we got to run this again. Hold on.
On the rent stabilization, on the impact of your proposals on housing in this city, there's a lot of concern that it'll cause people to leave, that it'll cause, dilapidated housing, that it'll cause landlords to go out of business. But my question to you is, how interested are you in working with or talking to the private sector on some of these issues? Are you flexible?
I'm going to keep it $1.50. If someone wasn't even remotely worried, they would just say, look, man, for far too long, we've propped up these businesses, okay? These businesses that require paywalling something that people need, shelter, okay? We don't treat housing like any other security, even though we don't treat housing and people who provide housing, which is a ridiculous thing to say to begin with, but people who provide housing as as people engaging in any other business. When businesses fail, they fail. For some reason, when people are providing housing, we don't treat that as a business that could just fail. Okay? It's completely out of whack. If these businesses fail, we take them over. It's that simple. Okay? If these businesses do not abide by the standards that we have set to improve the welfare of all these tenants, then, sorry, we take them over. It's that simple. For far too long, there have been no government intervention in the field of housing, and the only intervention has been at the behest of capital owners. We need to look at this situation with honesty. We need to recognize that the overwhelming majority of Americans are renters. They're not owners. Okay? We have a real home ownership crisis in this country. Homes are seen as the only way for upward social mobility. Not to get Chinese with it, but in the words of Xi Jinping, houses are for shelter. They're not for speculation. Even an animal in the wild needs shelter, and we treat our own citizens, we treat our own neighbors in ways that we wouldn't even treat an animal. You see a dog out on the streets in the cold, and you bring the dog home. You try to offer the dog food. But when it's a human being, we literally just like walk past them. Now, my argument isn't to make it everybody else's problem individually, because I'm not a fucking liberal. My expectation is not that every single person on their 9 to 5, on their daily commute, turn into a social worker in the process for a brief moment when they see someone experiencing like a fucking mental health crisis. My solution is, this is a systemic problem and it requires systemic solutions. This is not something that regular citizens are supposed to deal with, okay? This is not a responsibility that like average Americans are tasked with shouldering. The responsibility of good governance, you know? We need housing for these people. We need permanent shelter for these people. They're human beings. It shouldn't be left up to charity either, because obviously Americans are the most charitable force on the planet, right? By the numbers when you look at it. And yet these problems persist. So clearly, if we're not insane, clearly if what's the fake Albert Einstein quote? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing 1,000 times and expecting different results. We're not insane people. We need to do something different.
In some of your views for what the solution might be to housing costs, or what the solution might be to a lack of inventory, or do you think that they can't be part?
I know it's false. That's why I said Einstein did not say that. It is falsely attributed to Einstein. Guys, I said that already. I know. Why do you guys never hear me? It's a fake quote. It doesn't also make sense because you can't bathe in the same river twice. It is impossible to try the same thing 1,000 times and expect different results, because it is literally impossible to try the same thing over and over again 1,000 times. By the virtue of trying the same thing over and over again, you have become a different person. You have become better at trying the same thing. Okay? Yes, I know the Lenin quote is fake too. It's falsely attributed to Lenin.
Part of the solution.
I think that every New Yorker can be part of the solution. And I am not only interested, but committed to having conversations with New Yorkers across the political spectrum. And I think for too long, leadership has been defined as someone who surrounds themselves with people who are quickest to say yes to each and every idea. You have to actually encourage and create space for disagreement, because that's what gets you the outcome of results. And, when we talk about freezing the rent for the more than 2 million New Yorkers who live in rent-stabilized housing, that happened 3 times before under the previous mayoral administration. New York City is still standing.
A bigger picture question. Tom Suozzi, he's a representative from here in New York. He often talks about you and Trump in the same sentence. But the suggestion there is that you know how to diagnose the problem, which you have on housing, on food, on childcare. But the solution that you're offering is all too simple. It's overpromising and in ways that you cannot deliver. Is there a risk that you might overpromise New Yorkers on things that you can't execute on?
You know, I would call him a colleague because we are part of the same party, the Democratic Party. And as Ed Koch said, a former Democratic mayor of New York City, that if you agree with me on 9 out of 12 issues.
No, man, you can absolutely try the same thing again without learning it all. No, it's impossible. No, literally. You will always marginally improve or get worse, but it will not be the same. By virtue of repetition, you have actually changed, okay? By even simply attempting something, you have actually changed. The only time where you're looking at an attempt is like maybe in math. Like that's it. But it can never be the same. You as a human, bro, math doesn't work that way. Yeah, no shit. I'm not talking about math. I'm talking about human beings. Like, what do you mean?
Vote for me. 12 out of 12, see a psychiatrist. We have to have room for disagreement within a party. Otherwise, we just become a monotone that doesn't accept the innate tension of people coming together. And this vision that we have for New York City, it's one that speaks to the scale of this crisis, much in the same way that when the former administration of New York City looked at childcare, they talked about developing universal pre-K. Many people thought that was unrealistic. Now it is a fact of life here in New York City. That is going to be the same, not only for freezing the rent, not only for making buses fast and free, but for universal childcare from 6 weeks to 5 years of age.
A lot of polls saying different things, but I think the gist of it is that, you know, in the race as it stands now, you've probably got about a third of the electorate in the city. First of all, if it were a two-man race between you and Cuomo, do you think for sure that you can win that race?
Absolutely. And I would tell you that I spent many months, including some where I was here on this show with you, where I was running for mayor in the Democratic primary, and we were told time and again it was inevitable that Andrew Cuomo was going to win the race. I was at 1% early in the spring of this same year, and then we won the race votes in primary history. So we are very confident about defeating Andrew Cuomo, just like we did in June. And what is outrageous to us is not the question of the implications of these machinations on the race. It's what they show, the blatant disregard that so many of these politicians have for the welfare of working class New Yorkers, 1 in 5 of whom can't even afford $2.90 to ride the bus.
Your democratic socialism has been just the center of everything that people talk about. But in this country, there's a big debate about the wealthy, the uber wealthy, the gap between the rich and the poor. Just this week, Tesla offered a pay package to Elon Musk that would potentially make him a trillionaire. Do you think trillionaires should exist?
I think
What are these questions, man? What are we doing? I mean, that's a softball, but even then, like what are we doing? Look at how we've moved beyond, like, should billionaires exist or should trillionaires exist? It's like, brrr, things are so bad and they're only going to get worse. What is this? One of the most infuriating elements of liberal discourse today is the active erasure of the historic roles abolitionist and socialist movements have played in creating some of the few livable and often iconic aspects of America, including but not limited to liberalism itself. Yeah. Wait. Oh, yeah. I saw this one. This one was crazy. This is not even a question. It's a fucking attack. Fuzz Shaker is on the table. Bernie and Zohran are going to be live soon from Brooklyn. And we're going to be tuning in when they go live.
the better question is whether working people should exist. Because what we're seeing right now is amidst this incredible wealth, we have people who are keeping the city running that have to now live outside of the city, outside of the state. There are New Yorkers who are living in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Connecticut because they just can't afford to live here. Amidst all of that, we have talk of trillionaires. I mean, it tells you where our political priorities are. And that's what is so frustrating is that when we talk about the cuts to SNAP benefits here in New York City, the throwing of millions off of their health insurance, it's not just a incident that has taken place in Washington, D.C. It is a function of the largest wealth transfer we've ever seen in our history of our country's politics.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely take the point that this inequality.
With all due respect to Hasan, but fuck Bernie, chatters, I can't begin to explain to you this fundamental role that Bernie is playing here. Zohran is not making Bernie look good. Bernie is helping Zohran. Bernie is platforming Zohran. Zohran is not platforming Bernie. Please stop. From your perspective, it might come across as like a person that you really like, a person that you have. Hasan equals champagne Zio-shill. I love that you did the racist double S and then still turned around and said I'm a Zio-shill. Bernie beat the shit out of me last weekend. Okay, if you're getting beat up by an 854-year-old man, then, you know, you're not going to make it. Come on, man. Come on now. Why are people against Bernie now? What did I miss? Oh, I mean, people are oppositional to Bernie for his firm commitment to liberal Zionism. He's like, a lot of people who thought in the past that Bernie Sanders was like actually presenting a radical change in the way that Americans view Israel were doing so because, he was actually an anti-Zionist. And they're realizing that this old man is not an anti-Zionist, but simply a liberal Zionist. And that that was the extent, like the length that he was going to go to was like what he was presenting in 2016. And of course, the attitude has shifted quite dramatically. And therefore, people have moved past Bernie Sanders' position, understandably, because it is the correct position to arrive at. Having said that, people who stand oppositionally to like a lending hand that Bernie offers them when they are anti-Zionist themselves are silly. Okay,